Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. And thank you for tuning in to it from wherever you are. Hope life is good in your region. I am very excited to have Robyn come to speak with us today. So as you know, these webinars are hosted by Shaparency, and the purpose is to educate, inspire, and empower global leaders like you to help modernize boards and ultimately make boards more efficient. Our expert speakers bring a wide range of leadership and board-related topics to the table. Shortly, you will have the privilege to spend some time with communication expert Robyn Hatcher, and she will show us how to make organizations and boards more profitable, efficient, and more inclusive by the way we communicate. My name is Red, and I am the event manager for Shaparency. Before I hand it over to Robyn, let me briefly introduce you to our webinar host, Shaparency. Shaparency's philosophy is to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of board and governance operations for businesses. Shaparency is kind of a new breed of technology, a driving force, a disruptor in the board industry. A board portal 2.0, if you will, with modern digital security, board education partners, and soon to be a series of board effectiveness measurement tools. We do like being different, and we are excited about being part of creating the future of boards and board operations. And we are excited about you being part of this journey. So we are thrilled about what's next. And as our founder, Ben, would say, excited to make boards and board operations less boring. We have also rolled out an offer for you to experience and take Shaparency for a test drive in your unique environment. It's a 14-day ride, no credit card required. So buckle up, that's a great ride. 2 quick notes before we begin. Write your questions in the Q&A section, and you can do this as we go. Our goal is to answer all of your questions at the end of the presentation, but if for some reason we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you afterwards. We also are recording this webinar, and you will receive a link to it via email from Shaparency shortly after this webinar ends. That email will also include today's presentation deck, more details on Shaparency, and of course on Robyn, our speaker of today. Now, I would like to introduce and present to you today's speaker, Robyn Hatcher. Robyn Hatcher is the founder and CEO of Speak, Etc. She's a communication expert, dynamic keynote speaker, author, thought leader, and an award-winning actress. Using her 15+ years in the entertainment industry and her experience as a certified neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, she will inspire you and invigorate you, and she will leave you with tangible communication skills that you can apply immediately. Her book, Standing Ovation Presentations, contain a unique communication style system that's called Actor Types. And this was actually named on Forbes.com as one of 2015's top 100 coaching books. Here is Robyn Hatcher and Communication RX for Enlightened Leadership. Lean in, everyone, and welcome, Robyn. The stage is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Couple of questions. Have you ever experienced any of these? Directors showing up for meetings and just read the notes and then disappear? Have you any board members who don't communicate with each other and frequently dismiss each other's opinions, get into conflict? Anything sound familiar here? What about information being repeatedly repeated over and over again? It's like somebody asks the same question over and over again. Meetings that don't feel worthwhile. You show up with a meeting and then you leave an hour later and you say, what was that about? Anything else? So if any of those are familiar to you, I would love for you to put a Y for yes in the chat. Just put Y for yes If nothing has happened like that, put N for no. And if it's an other, I'd love to know what are some of the things that you've experienced. I myself have been on 3 different executive boards, one of them being the community board of Manhattan. So you can imagine it was a 50 plus board of individuals from Manhattan in the largest district of Manhattan. So I know what it's like to be at an ineffectual board meeting. I know what it's like to have conflict that lasts for hours and hours and hours. And so I am here to help you. Yes, I hear a lot of yes from Sue, a yes from Stephen, yes from Michael. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. So how healthy is your board communication? Because those are symptoms of poor health. This is called Communication RX. I want to help you get healthier. So those are symptoms of poor health. So if you're not currently at on a board, or you're not serving on a board, or you hope to be on a board, I know you've been at meetings. I know you've been at team meetings. I know you've been in conversations. So I want you to think about it like that. How healthy is your board communication? How healthy is your meeting communication at a scale of 1 to 10? 1, it frequently needs the emergency care coming in. It's like, oh, wait. That's not how we meant. That's not what I meant. Or a 10, which is pretty healthy. And every once in a while you get a checkup. All right, so let's see where we are here. How many people are a 1 to 10? Let me know where you are. Like, all the yeses that you've had those experience. An 8, good for you, Paul, love it. And anybody else want to share where they are? They're bored. All right, as we go along, I'd love for you to share. And if you have another thing that you're experiencing, 6, we have a couple of 6s in the middle. Okay, 7, great, Emma, thank you. Oh, Rachel's got a 5, all right. So I am here to offer you prescriptions for the health of your communication and your board's communication, your individual communication, because communication is the foundation of everything in my book. So what we're going to cover, some of the prescriptions, I have an entire medicine bag full of prescriptions. But today I only have time for a few. I'm going to talk about the L word, and I'll explain that in a minute. I'm going to share with you my ICU needs. Not intensive care, but intentional communication unifiers. And then I'm going to start talking about when those needs are not matched well, and your personal brand, because that's what you bring into every board and every leadership position. So boards are focused, and many businesses in general are focused on these things on the right here. You've got the fiduciary, you've got the strategy, structure, talent, and so much energy, so much time is put into making sure those are effective, because yes, that is the health of the whole business. The health of the whole organization is in really meeting the needs of here on your screen, right? However, McKinsey did a report on the board's perspective and identified that many boards have improved the structures and processes, but they also have to work on mindset and boardroom dynamics. Mindset and boardroom dynamics, something that is not in that list that I just showed you before. So in a sense, yes, the structure and the processes are important, but the boardroom dynamics is also so important. And to have a healthy board, you really need all 3. So you're juggling a lot as either a board director or even a member, or as an executive director. Any kind of business professional has a lot to juggle, right? All 3 of these, because they're very diverse. And now we have a pandemic. We've got the stress of that. We've got people working from home. We've got people working in hybrid situations. We've got a lot of employee turnover, which is going to affect the effectiveness of the board. It's going to affect the membership of the board. And we have the diversity and inclusion. So people are juggling tons of things. However, board dynamic communication is then more challenging than ever with all of these activities, all these challenges that we are trying to juggle at the same time, right? But like I said, building communication habits is the foundation of healthy boards. So it's something that we really need to focus on, which is why I'm here today to help you to focus on it. And the way that I see leadership, the way that I see communication, the way I see any type of places of leadership or connectivity or dynamics means that you need to be like a really skilled physician. Now, if you were to go into a doctor's office and they just took one look at you, not even like just glanced up, started writing you a prescription and handed it to you and said, take it, chances are you probably wouldn't take that prescription. And chances are you probably wouldn't go back to that doctor, right, either? So a really good physician needs to be able to diagnose what's happening. What are your habits? What are you doing? What happened in the past? Where are all of these other habits so that they can make a really clear diagnosis and give you the prescription that you need. A really excellent physician does preventative care. They want to find out, they want to make sure that you can take your checkups. They may want to make sure that you exercise. They want to make sure that you are eating right so that you can prevent disease. Now, that is what makes an excellent communicator as well. We need to diagnose what the individuals that we are interacting with need so that we can give them the prescription, so that we can share with them. And when we're really effective as communicators, we do preventative actions by sharing things with them that we know will help them to understand us, to collaborate with us, to show that we care about them. Now, you might say, well, Robyn, you already told us that we're juggling a lot. Where are we going to have the time or the resources to devote to board dynamics, to devote to understanding individuals? Why can't they just do what I say? Why can't they just listen to what I'm talking about and do it? Or just don't argue and just think about me too, you know? So yeah, it does seem like it may take some extra time. However, improving communication can yield 47% higher total returns. It can yield 4.6 times better performance in the people that you're interacting with, and it can get you 17 hours back in your work week. Now, who wouldn't want any of those benefits, any of those ROIs? So companies with highly effective communicators have 47% higher returns. Remember, we're fiduciary is one of the top things that you're looking for, right? Also, employees, or we can look at it as board members, who feel their voice is heard is 4.6 times more likely to be empowered and perform their best work. So no more of that wasted time in the boardroom. 17 hours a week is spent in people clarifying ineffective communication. Remember that idea of having too long meetings or meetings going on or being ineffective. 17 hours a week you can get back in your board life by improving communication. So as you can see, improving your communication culture is worth the investment in the time that it's going to take. And I'm going to show you how to do it with the first prescription. The L word, third level listening. We've all heard about how well we listen, how poorly we listen and all that, but how do you listen? When a person is really listened to, from your point of view and reflect back, it's like emotional oxygen. I love that term. You're giving them emotional oxygen. And with all of these ideas and challenges that we are juggling, people nowadays really need to have some emotional oxygen. And so there are 3 levels of listening that we typically do. Now, imagine someone comes into your office, comes and sits next to you, or even raises their hand in the boardroom with a specific challenge or an idea or a feeling or a problem that they want to share. Now, how many of you listen to that information and immediately start thinking, I've heard a much more dire situation. There are bigger problems. And I can't wait for that person to stop talking so I can share with them the bigger and more important challenges that I am facing. That is what we call listening to win. You're trying to win the argument, win the conversation. My idea, my challenge, my thoughts are better than yours. Okay, so say the same person comes with the same situation. You're a little bit more evolved now, right? And you listen for a little bit longer. And then all of a sudden you think, oh my gosh, I know exactly the company policy. I know exactly what this person should do. And I cannot wait to tell them what they need to do. And sometimes maybe you don't even wait. You'll interrupt. It's like, oh, you know what you should do? That is what we call listening to fix. So you're either listening to win, you're listening to fix, but there's a third level listening, which a good physician, which a good communicator is going to employ 100% or hopefully 99% of the time. So that same person comes to you and they share with you what they shared with you. And you put down everything and you pay attention and you stay present and you notice their body language. You notice their vocal tone. You notice how upset they are or how indifferent they are or some little tweaks that's different than what you've heard them say before. You also hear and you think, oh, I've heard this from other members before. I've heard it from other people. And you get curious as to why they're making that complaint, why they're talking like this, why this is a challenge. You get so curious that you start asking them questions and you go deeper. You go deeper and you find out more about the challenge and the problem. And that is called listening to learn. Listening to learn is where we can understand what that other person is feeling, doing, and what the real problem is. Because you know that so many times people will come to you with a problem that is not really the real problem. And often when we stay stuck in listening to fix, we get involved in fixing that problem. How many of you have had situations where you've spent time and money and resources into fixing a problem, only for a week later or a month later or a couple of days later sometimes, that another problem very similar pops up because you haven't fixed the real problem. And that becomes more time consuming and more expensive. It's like playing that game of whack-a-mole. You know, this is my problem, I'm going to fix it. Oh, there's another problem. Oh, there's another problem. Oh, there's another problem. They're all similar problems. But if you listen to learn, you can understand and get to the root of that problem. You can start to understand what the problem is specifically and fix it and not just put a Band-Aid on it. So many of my clients I work with, they want me to put a Band-Aid on the leadership problem that they see. And so I go in and I say, no, I got to do a complete diagnosis because the leadership isn't the problem. There was one organization I went in, I talked to the entire front line. And once I found out what the real problems were, I created a priority list so that this client can then present it to their leaders. Then together, we were able to fix the real problems in the organization, right? So listening to learn, you want to stay present. You want to stay curious. Curiosity is such a lost art these days. Listen for repeated themes. Listen for core issues. What is the heart of the issue? It's not the outside trappings of the problem, but what is the core issue? Take the nonverbal cues when you can and listen for the needs and triggers. I'm going to explain what that means by needs and triggers in a minute. But these are the things that you really want to know. Get to the core. And like I said, on the boards that I've served, the core issues are really very different than what we often think that they are. So there's a lot of scientific evidence, a lot of research around what motivates human beings to do anything that they're asked to do. And those two motivators are threat and reward. You know, the brain processes threat and reward in 1/5 of a second. So when we feel rewarded, we get this really great feel-good hormones, the dopamine and the serotonin and the oxytocin come out, right? And when we're feeling threatened, we feel the stress hormone of cortisol. Cortisol comes out. So when our needs are being met, we feel rewarded. When our needs are not being met, we feel triggered and threatened. Now, there's so much talk about diversity on boards now and how important it is. In fact, diverse companies outperform other companies by 36% in profitability. 36%. So having a diverse board is very profitable these days. And it's important to recognize that diversity is only defined by physical attributes. This again is from a McKinsey report called Diversity Wins. So it's not just the physical or racial or sexual orientation attributes that contribute to diversity. Diversity is also in the needs and styles of individuals. So that's what I'd like to cover next today, which I call my ICU needs, the intentional communication unifiers. So what are those needs? Those are those same needs and triggers that we're talking about. We all human beings have basic needs and triggers that when they are not met, they trigger an emotional response. Here are the ICU needs as I identified them: importance, connectedness, clarity, independence, inclusion, and purpose. So everyone has these needs to some extent. I call them priority needs because in the workplace, in the boardroom, when we are in a stressful situation of any kind, one of those needs pops up, and it depends on our nature and our nurture. So since we all have these needs, how we were raised, who we were exposed to, how our first job turned out, how our first board experience turned out, that is going to trigger a need in us that rises above all of the others. And when that need is not met, we get emotionally triggered. So let's go through those needs a little bit. The need to feel importance. They need to feel acknowledged and seen. When people have that need, it's like, oh, am I called on? Did I get the best assignment? Did I get the best desk? Am I the best seat? Like, did you tell me how great it was that I did X, Y, Z? Those people who really crave and need importance, that's what they're going to be feeling. When they don't get it, they get triggered and emotionally they're not there as participatory as they could be. Second need is connectedness. Those people that really want to feel like, they want to feel like you like them. They want to feel part of a group. They want to feel like they have relationships within. Those are the people that come early and chit chat with everybody and really want to have these social events that are so important and really want to know about your family and your children. When they don't feel that connection, they get triggered. And all of these triggers are so threatening because of what it does is it starts that cortisol rise. Then we have clarity. Those are the people that need to have the I's dotted and the T's crossed. They need to make sure, is this board report correct? I'm sorry, this number, like this treasury report is missing X, Y, Z. Or you have this, you missed this in the note. Or why are you doing this? Or the Robert Rules of Order says this, right? So those are people who really need a sense of clarity. And when they don't have clarity, they get so confused and they get so triggered and they cannot do their best work. Now, I want you to think about all of these needs as we go through, because I'm sure you interact with them. I'd love for you to tell me what are the ones that you interact with the most, and of course, which are the ones that you have a priority need for. And this next one is independence. People who don't like being micromanaged. They don't like the rules. Those are the people that's like, why do we have to do that? Can't we do it this way? They like to think creatively. They like choices. They like options. That rule breaking is part of their DNA. So they don't like being micromanaged, as I said. So independence. Then we have inclusion. Now, inclusion, you need to feel in the loop. You need to feel fairly treated. If somebody gets this assignment, then they get jealous or they think, oh, that person came in late and wasn't acknowledged, wasn't told anything about it, but then you called on me for being late. That person has missed 2 meetings. What's wrong? Why were they allowed to miss meetings and I'm not? So people who really want to feel like they're in the loop, or somebody gave you information or gave them information, that person information that I don't know. How come I didn't know about that? How come I didn't get that email? Those are the people that are easily triggered by feeling as though they are not treated fairly. Now, like I said, we all have all these needs, but some of them are way stronger in others. And this last one is purpose, which is, a recent study said that 1 out of 5 people in the workplace feel like the job that they're doing doesn't matter. And that's a really, really debilitating way. And most burnout is caused by people feeling ineffective. So when people have a feeling of purpose, if you're sitting in a meeting time and time again, the board president has not really told you why this is important or why this initiative what it is actually going to do for the company or the business or for society. That person who has a really strong need for purpose is going to feel left out and feel triggered. And it's like, what am I doing here? I'm just pushing papers. I don't like it. And they're not going to be effective. They're not going to be good board members. So those are the 6 ICU needs as I've identified them. There are many needs. So which are the needs that you see or encounter most often in the people that you interact with? I'd love for you to use the chat to let me know what some of those needs are that you've experienced. And at the same time, what are some of the needs that you yourself have? So what are some of the needs that you experience? What are some of the needs that you have? Feel free to put those in the chat. Importance, connectedness, clarity, independence, inclusion, all of those needs are important. Which are the ones that you encounter the most? Great. Deaf connectedness strikes a chord. Great, Sue. Yeah, thank you. Both being connected, because a lot of times I'll walk into these boards, it's like, I feel like I don't belong, nobody likes me. And if that's the case, if that's what's happening, then you're going to be triggered, you're not going to be doing your best work. So not understanding someone's priority need is what makes communication so difficult. And when we learn how to listen to learn, then we can actually have better communication, because then we get to understand what that person's needs and triggers. Yes, and Mark says purpose is very, very powerful. Very true, Mark. It's so important to find out how you can get a sense of purpose, especially in your board members, because otherwise you're just spending time and spinning your wheels, really. To effectively communicate, this is Tony Robbins, we have to realize that we're all different in the way we perceive the world. And that's where the needs and triggers comes in so well. And you have to understand that those differences in the way that you communicate with others. For instance, I was called in to do triage in an IT department recently with a large organization that I work with all the time. And what was happening is they had just gotten a new head of IT who was having issues with his assistant who had been there longer. Now, his assistant was coming in late and calling in sick a lot, so they felt like something was going on. So the administrator knew that the assistant had been there long, wanted me to go in and coach him so that he could be better, find out what the needs are. So I found out 2 things. One, the fact that he had been there longer than the new person who came in to be his boss. And I thought, could this be a problem with feeling of importance? Then I found out that the assistant was African-American, the boss was Caucasian. And so I thought, is it a problem with inclusion? So I sat down and I talked to this guy, and yes, the racial difference was an issue. We talked about that. But what we discovered, it was not a DEI problem at all, as much as it was an ICU problem, because all of his needs had been triggered. He wasn't getting any of his needs met, right? And what I discovered was this guy, we'll call him Dan. Dan had a real strong sense and need for independence. He loved finding out creative ways to do the same thing, right? And so this need for independence was very strong with him. And what he was finding is that his new boss, if we call him Stan was really into clarity. He had a real strong need for clarity. He wanted things done a certain way in this certain process. And what Dan was finding was this process was cutting out his independence, his creativity. And he felt like he was being micromanaged. And by that micromanaging, he felt like Stan was judging him, was saying that he didn't trust his outcomes, didn't trust what he was doing, which was amplified because he was one of the only people of color in the organization. So then that teed in and triggered his inclusion problem, right? So what I did is like, I need to talk to Stan. I need to find out what's going on. When I talked to him, I found out, yes, he had this real sense of clarity. And the interesting thing is he also had a problem with inclusion because Stan turned out was on the Asperger's spectrum, and he was very sensitive about that. And when I realized that both of these gentlemen had the same outcome in mind, they really loved what they did. They really loved finding the solutions for the IT. And they also had this inclusion issue in common. So when I explained to them what the needs were that were misaligned or mismatched, they were able to come up with a solution that worked for them and their communication, so that now they can understand each other. Now they can get along better. This is what happens when you get to listen to learn and get to find out what each other's needs and triggers are. Then you can help and feed those needs and triggers. So dealing with mismatches is the triage that you can do. It's the emergency operations you can do. And at the same time, knowing ahead of time, you can do preventative by continually talking or making relationships with people when you need them, before you need them rather. Because so now I want you to think about a situation that you may have had to deal with recently that was full of conflict or misunderstanding or something like that. And think about that. Was it possibly an ICU mismatch at the core? Think about who you were, what your needs were, what the needs of the other person were. Or if there are two people separate, think about their different needs and how that could be a mismatch. And now think about what you could have done to lessen the threat. During Q&A, we can play with that. But what could you have done to lessen the threat? I'm going to give you some hints right now. But the biggest hint is why this is important is what's in it for them. Find out what's in it for them, because people do not do things for your reasons. They do them for their reasons. And their reasons are tied to their ICU needs, and they're tied to who it is that they are. And so how to motivate a person is to figure out what their need is, what is in it for them, because love this saying, logic tells, emotion sells. We are always selling our opinions. We are always selling our viewpoint. We're always selling somebody something if we want to get them to move forward. And so how can you make it emotionally worth their while rather than telling them how to do it? And that, again, you want to identify and work through and speak to their ICU need. And so, for instance, if their need is importance, they need more verbal acknowledgement, more nonverbal acknowledgement as well. That smile when they walk into the room, that means, oh yeah, thank you, I'm glad you're here. And oh, that was a great job. So that preventative care and the other care, preventative care for people who need importance is to randomly send them a message of saying how grateful you are for something that they did. Or in the middle of a meeting, tell people, oh, that was really great the way that Mark just did that. That is one way that you can fill their bank account and do preventative care. And in the moment, you can also use that to motivate them in a conversation. Let them know that they are valued, give them extra assignments. Like if there's a club or a challenge or a research that needs to be done, give it to the person who seeks importance. Connectedness. Make sure that you value their rapport building. They value it so much. So make rapport. Don't just jump right into business. Don't just say, hello, here, give me this. It's like they're going to start to feel like, oh, you're trying to kill me. Because a lot of these threats is a very weird way that our brain operates is when we are feeling that threat of our need not being met, it's almost as if we're going to die. It's irrational, I know, but our brains think, oh my God, I can't survive if that person doesn't say hello to me. So those are one of make small talk, share something personal. Connectedness, give them time frames, give clarity, give them time frames, put things in writing, make sure that everything is precise and clear. Make sure that all of your ideas are written down and fully fleshed out. Don't give them this high level of opinions. Oh, let's do this soon. No, they need to know when, they need to know how long the meeting is, and they need to know in advance. They will work much harder and be much more taxed and stressed when they don't have clarity. Independence, like we just talked about in my example, they don't like feeling micromanaged. So look for ways to give them choices and options and ask for their opinions. Asking for their opinion makes them think creatively. Even if you don't act on it, ask for their opinion is going to make them feel wanted and independent. Inclusion, let them know that you've had similar conversations with everyone. Be transparent, as transparent as you can, because when people are not feeling included, it registers in the brain in the same place as physical pain. And people are going through physical pain when they're not feeling included. So how can you make sure that you're transparent in feeling and making people feel included? And then with this popular one, most important one, purpose, they need to feel that they make a difference. Don't just tell them the why behind what you're doing. Even if you ask them for a report, if you ask them for this, tell them why you're asking for it and how that particular report is going to have an effect on a bigger picture or a bigger project. Then they're going to feel that sense of purpose. So those are just a really light way of finding out and figuring out and getting through the mismatch. And I would love to talk to you more in depth and talk to you about what your problems are and see how we can get through to some of those mismatches. And so the last thing I want to leave you with is asserting your personal brand. Because if you are on a board already, if you are hoping to be on a board, what we are looking for, what people are looking for are the value that you bring. So how are you showing up? Are you speaking out and getting clear about how you're showing? What do you have to give to the organization? How can you represent it both physically in the words that you use and the ideas that you bring up? Are you speaking up all the time or enough? Are you asking the right questions? Are you coming with values first? Are you sharing what your values are? Your brand is what other people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So think about it. What are people saying about you? What do you have to bring? What is your special sauce or what something, or your secret sauce or your superpower? Lead with your superpower. Let people know, because it is your vision, your insights, and your perception. That's what I call the VIP brand. Your vision. What is your vision? What are the insights that you bring from other avenues, from other jobs, other experiences? What is your vision? What do you see moving forward? And how are you being perceived by other people? Those are the three things that you want to keep in mind, because what you do speaks so loud, we cannot hear what you say. So make sure everything is aligned. You may have this great vision, you may have these great values, but if you don't look like you do, if you don't sound like you do, if you don't show up like you do, people are not going to believe it. Leave you with these statistics. Simplest way respect is commanded is through the tone of your voice. Sometimes I'll work with clients on working on the tone of their voice so that they sound more authoritative, so that they sound more confident. Nonverbal signals have 5 times as much impact as verbals. Sometimes you walk into a room and people are like, oh, wow, he looks angry, or, oh, she looks too happy all the time. What are some of the ways that you can work on your nonverbal so that you are communicating your personal brand? Body language counts for 60 to 80% of negotiations. So how can you work on body language so that you can win the information or win the negotiation easier and comfortably? On the right, how you are perceived is how you are received, and that impacts what you can achieve. And I know everybody here is a high achiever. How do you be a higher achiever? Work on the way you're being perceived. And have a few takeaways for you. I'd love you to look at your teams, the people you interact with, your families even, try to discern what their ICU needs and how you might be able to address them. We have time for questions. I can take those questions too, about how you might be able to address someone's needs. How will you practice listening to learn? Make sure as I take a few seconds after somebody starts talking to you, take those few seconds and think, okay, I'm not going to fix them. I'm not going to try to fix them. I'm going to listen. I'm going to keep listening. or I'm not going to try to win this conversation right now. I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to keep listening. I'm going to learn deeper. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to go deeper. And then if it needs to be fixed, I will find a collaborative way to talk about it. And of course, how can you define and assert your personal brand? There's another really startling statistic is it takes 2 to 3 seconds to make a first impression nowadays, probably less. And it can take up to 17 visits to undo a negative first impression. So if you have not made a great first impression, how many people are going to give you 17 more chances to try? So I'll turn it over to Red for questions, but thank you so much for your attention. And I would love to find out what your questions are.
Robyn, that was really, really great. I know I'm motivated. I don't know about you guys, but thank you so much for this information. It was so fun also to go through this process. And I think it made all of us think a little bit further than before in terms of communication. So this is definitely something that I will tack onto my leadership tool belt. But yes, we do have questions and we can run straight into that. But if you haven't noted your question as of yet, please do so, and we will make sure to get to it. If we don't get to them, but I think we have enough time, we will follow up with you afterwards. So Robyn, the first question here is from Mark. Curious to know your opinion on whether or not a listener to win can overcome this and become a listener to learn.
That's a great question. And I believe that any change is possible if you want to do it. And so one of the ways that because some of this is legacy learning, some of this is fossilized learning. It's true. Like I said, a lot of it is nature and nurture. You can, if you find, and this is why I tack on brain science to a lot of the information and a lot of the coaching that I do, because you have to want to change. And one of the reasons why the ways that I convince clients to change is by telling them what happens to the other person when you continually are listening to win. So if you're continually listening to win, you are going to create these stress levels in your people. They're not going to do the best work. They're going to be leaving. They're going to be passive aggressive because a lot of times they don't want to speak out. It's like, oh, you're listening to win, or you're yelling at me, or you're telling me this. They're just not going to come to you anymore. They're just not going to trust you anymore. They're not going to share their opinions. So what happens is your entire orbit gets smaller. So if I can convince someone that this is something that they do not want to happen in their organization or on their board, sometimes that then will help them want to change. And so the way that if you really want to change, because I firmly believe that nobody's going to change if they don't want to, or if they don't have a great motivation for it. So if we can attach it to something financial, if we could attach it to something time-wise, time-saving, then convince them that they need to change, and then give them habits. And those habits are, somebody talks to you, start counting to 10. Because what you need to do is stay focused and in the present. Or another great habit is to look at somebody's eye color. It's like to really find a focal point in that person so that they are really sucked in to stay present, and to find out whatever it is that you can do to stay present. Then that's a practice. And then what I did this recently with the coaching client, I would suggest that he have questions ready to go one question deeper every time somebody said something to him. And because he was a huge listening to win person. And so what I did is through our coaching, and it didn't take that long. Now that I remember, he was like, this is a great example for you, is that, yes, it is possible. And at first he thought, well, I don't want to do it. And what I actually faced him with is you know what? You really don't want to change. So we need to get you to the point that you want to change. And then he started to see that. And so when I then said, every time you talk to somebody, you need to go a step deeper and get curious, stay curious, that made a huge change in him. And at first what he would say is oh, it just feels so fake. It just feels like, and I say, yeah, that's what it's going to feel like. It's going to feel fake. It doesn't feel right for a while. But then he started seeing the results. Then he started seeing that the people would tell him more, that the relationships got richer. And so then it started feeling more natural. So now he starts feeling it natural. So a long-winded answer to your question is yes, it is possible. It takes concentration, it takes work, and it takes determination, it takes wanting.
Mm. Sue is asking, well, she's first saying inspiring presentation, thank you. Her question is, how do you make yourself heard if your line manager appears distant and removed? It comes across that they are disinterested and not listening, which is not very inspiring.
Yes, yes. And Sue, you were also the one that said that connectedness breeds like, so your line manager obviously doesn't know that you have a strong need for connectedness, not feeding into it. So there are a couple of things that you could do. There's this brain science thing is like, now that you've listened to this presentation, one thing that might work moving forward, and then I'll give you some other more specific things, is to reframe the story that you're telling yourself about him or her. Now, we all tell ourselves stories based on what our needs and triggers are. So the story, I'm guessing, that you're telling about that person is that they don't like me, they don't respect me, they don't get me, they don't, all of that don't, because it's based on a need that we have. I do this myself because I have a strong need for connectedness. And so what you can then start to tell that story is like, oh, you know what? That person probably has a real high priority for clarity. So what he's caring about is whether this is clear, this is accurate, this, and he doesn't understand how important this connectedness part of my personality is. So when you start to reframe things, you see people in a different light, then your brain says, okay, it's not me, it's not me, it's not them. And so one of the questions you want to do is you always ask yourself, is this the story that I'm telling myself, or is this the truth? Now, the other thing to do is with that person, and let me reiterate what is like the heard about the distant and removed. So making small talk might, like if somebody has a strong need for clarity or that type of person, making small talk could drive them batty. And so what you want to do when somebody has a very distinct way of communicating that is a mismatch for you, meet them where they are. It's like talk to them in that clipped tone of voice, get that point, get right to the point. You want to almost imitate or mirror what that other person is saying or doing. And I know it might be in the antithesis or whatever of what you are like, but when you can match that other person, that can be helpful, because then they start to feel in rapport with you. They say, oh, she's like me. She has that type or that part of me. And then they start to listen to you differently. Another thing is, like, we could talk offline about this, but it could be the types of conversation that you're working at. So not trying to make them into who it is that you are, but talk to them at this point, and then we could talk about really getting that message straight through. Hope that makes sense. If you have a follow-up, Sue, please let me know and I will answer that.
Great. And Danielle is asking, is there a way to measure or assess a board's level of communication effectiveness?
Great question. I happen to have assessment tools available that I think for a board would be really, really helpful. There are assessment tools that measure people's communication style. There's like the DISC behavioral. There are assessment tools that measure their motivation levels. And then what this tool that I have available is then you can measure them against each other. So everyone takes an online assessment and you get their individualized results. And then you put those individual results into another tool or algorithm, which then will mark in the spots where everybody shows up. So those are assessed. There are online assessments, very smart online assessments where you can do that. And then you would have somebody like me come in and debrief it and let you know. You could probably, those are great tools. And I have a simple assessment that you can start to okay. Let me go back to that. You can take that. Sorry. All right. So I'll go back to that in a second. But what you can then do is find out where they are in communication wise and compare it with each other. But like I said, there are assessment tools, and I think that that would be a really smart thing. And with some of these behavioral assessments, what you can then do is, like, when you look at the chart, you think, what's missing from my board? You know, so there are so many different communication styles, and there's no right and there's no wrong. There's just that you need all of them. You know, if we had everybody who was independent, that would be a mess. And if everybody was clarity, nothing would get moved forward, right? So you need everybody. And so a lot of times what we do, especially like we do this around job placement and all of this, and in boards, I'm sure we do it too. We interview people for boards. Just happened on my community board is having interviews. I'm not on it anymore, but a friend of mine is in on the interview process. What we tend to do is we invite people that are just like us, or that we think that we're going to get along with. That's not the way to run a board, because I'm not going to take anybody who is X, because I don't get along with them that well. And it's not like, and instinctively, it's not going to say, oh, I don't like that person because I didn't, but instinctively, I'm not going to be drawn to them. So one of the things that you might want to do is do some of those assessments, see what's missing from your team, and then during interviews, find out ways to interview for that missing quality.
Great. And we do have time for one last question. And I see that, Gwyneth, you're asking if the materials will be available. Yes, we mentioned that a little bit earlier, but both the webinar as well as the PDF of this will be available. We will send it out to everyone. So the last question we have time for is from Brian. What is the best way to deal with conflicting needs?
The best way to deal with conflicting needs, there are a couple of ways. So like I said, somebody's got to be the one to meet the need and call it out. And sometimes if it's been conflicting for a long time, so you have this understanding and you have this, this calcified relationship, sometimes what it needs then is you need to do a crucial conversation. And what a crucial conversation is really calling out. And I have a prescription for those too, like how you create them. It's like, you know what, when you do X, Y, Z, it's not, you don't judge it, you don't evaluate it. When this X, Y, Z happens, it triggers this in me, or this, it makes me feel like this. I'm wondering, and it's making me think X, Y, Z. I'm wondering how we can look at this and get to a collaboration or get through something. So sometimes when the mismatch is really already established, and then we fall into the patterns of that establishment, then sometimes it's time for a conversation around it. Now, if it hasn't come to that level, you can do what that seeding of, when you find out what their need is, start feeding that need when a complex situation is not imminent or not in at the moment. So for instance, if you know somebody has a connection and it's a mismatched need, all you have to do is like, no, it'd be painful if you're in clarity and you don't understand it. Tell that person how grateful they are, how much you like them, or ask them about their kids 2 or 3 times. Talk about something that is not work related or board related. You start feeding that bank so that that person then starts to see you a little bit differently. They don't see your needs as much as they see you more in line with their needs. So those are the 2 ways you could do it. Sometimes if it's calcified, it's like, you've got to go in there and have that conversation of what you're seeing and what you're feeling. And the second way is to start feeding them, you know, doing that preventative medicine work on them so that then they get healthier in the way that they see you.
Thank you so much, Robyn, for that. And thank you, everyone, for great questions, too. If we have not gotten to your question as of yet, you know that we will follow up with you after the webinar. So I'm ready for the music, Robyn. So again, great music, by the way, hopefully getting everybody moving a little bit. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today's webinar. It's been great having you. And just 3 quick things for you. For further information about Shaparency, to book a demo, to access your free 14-day test drive, you know to go to shaparency.com and get that. No credit card required for that. You can also enroll in our global board education and certification course, and that is hosted by Shaparency's board education partner. And that you can find at shaparency.com/board education. And for more information on upcoming webinars and other events, you go to shaparency.com/events. And we will shortly, I believe next week, release the upcoming webinar for that information. So hopefully you will join that with us as well. Robyn, it's been a pleasure. So thank you so much for sharing your communication expertise as well as the tips with us. And thank you everyone again for joining us. From me and the entire Shaparency team, have a great rest of your day and see you soon.